The parable in our reading this morning from Luke's Gospel begins with Jesus saying that there was a rich man who had a manager. And charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. The Greek word that is translated in our version as manager is oikonomos. And it's usually translated as steward, manager or steward. Okay? The Greek word for house is oikos. So therefore, a steward is someone who takes care of or manages the house. And from a related Greek word, oikonomia, which means household management, we get our present English word, economics. Economics. Economics is the management of resources. The resources of a house, the resources of a group of people, of a country, or a planet. So this word, oikonomics, refers to the practice of being good stewards, good managers of what God has entrusted into our care, God's resources. Oikonomics. I once attended a lecture, and the speaker was talking about businesses and the issue of corporate social responsibility, CSR. And he shared with us two specific examples which speak to a corporate sense of stewardship and future vision, or lack thereof. Now, way back in 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area died after some Tylenol capsules had been laced with cyanide. Remember this? Back in 1982. I wasn't born yet, but 7 people died in the Chicago area because somebody had tampered with these Tylenol pills. Okay? Food and Drug Administration in the U.S., the FDA, they did not require a recall, but the makers of Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson, issued a voluntary recall of all the Tylenol products, which at that time amounted to over $100 million worth of product. Tylenol's share of the market crashed from 35% to 8%. But within a year, due to Johnson & Johnson's prompt handling of the incident and their leadership in developing those tamper-proof bottles, right, for medications, the ones that we can't open now, Tylenol recovered its market share, and in fact, within a few years, Tylenol became the most popular over-the-counter analgesic in the entire United States. Now, a second example involves the scandal that surrounded Ford Motor Company and the infamous Pinto automobile. How many of you actually owned a Pinto? Hands up. Angelo owned one. The rest of us are too embarrassed to say they were actually owned a Pinto. If you know anything about Pinto, you know that earlier models of the Pinto had a design flaw that could result in the gas tank being pushed forward in a rear-end collision, causing the tank to be ruptured by some protruding bolts, which could lead to deadly fires and explosions. So Ford conducted a cost-benefit analysis that compared the cost of repairing the gas tanks to the amount of money, so how much money would automobile manufacturers have to pay to repair the gas tanks versus how much would they have to pay out in lawsuits for injuries and loss of life resulting from faulty gas tanks. So Ford concluded that it would be better for car companies to pay the victims for the resultant injuries and deaths than to invest in changing the design and placement of the gas tanks. It would have cost about $11 per vehicle to fix the gas tanks, and there's about 12.5 million vehicles that all of the manufacturers were selling at that time, and it would have cost the automotive industry about $137 million to fix the problem. But the cost of settling court cases due to death and injury, based on a projection of about 2,100 accidents, 180 burn deaths, 180 serious burn injuries, assuming settlements of about $200,000 per death, $67,000 per serious injury, and $700 per burnt out car. These are 1973 numbers, and just Pinto after all. All of this would amount to $49.5 million. So it would cost them about $137 million to fix the problem and only $49 million to pay out settlements. So, given this information, Ford decided against the redesign of the Pinto. And this was leaked in an infamous memo called the Pinto Memo. Well, Ford's idea of stewardship was based on what they thought was best for the company, but it proved to be very, very short-sighted in vision. Because Ford may have saved money, but they also gained a reputation for manufacturing a car which came to be known as the barbecue that seats four, right? Forbes magazine called Pinto one of the worst cars of all time. Ford and Johnson & Johnson made different stewardship choices which not only affected their immediate successes, but also significantly impacted their futures. Johnson & Johnson voluntarily withdrew, recalled all their products, suffered present loss, but gained for the future, and Ford protected their present situation and paid the price for it going forward. What does this have to do with our text this morning? Abby, let's get rid of that Pinto picture. Go back to our picture. The parable of the shrewd manager from Luke is probably one of the hardest parables to understand. As Barry was reading it, you were probably thinking, I don't quite get this. It's caused over the years all sorts of responses, everything from confusion to outright hostility. How can Jesus tell this parable? How is this true? The problem with this parable is that Jesus seems to approve the actions of a dishonest steward. Right? The story goes like this. A rich man's manager was told that he would be fired because he was bad at his job. He was misusing his master's resources. So faced with the prospect of losing his position, knowing that he didn't have the strength to do any physical labor, being too proud to beg, the manager decided, well, you know what? I will buy myself a future. I'll buy myself a future. So he called those that owed his master money, and he told them to write down the lower amount that they actually owed. By this, the manager was hoping that when he got fired, that others would welcome him into their homes. He was investing in his future, although it was with his master's money, right? It wasn't with his money. He was a crook. He was cooking the books. Often this parable is called the parable of the shrewd manager, not the parable of the dishonest manager, but the parable of the shrewd manager. I don't think there's a lot of us who want that adjective shrewd to be applied to us, right? Nobody wants to say, oh, you're very shrewd. We don't want people to say that. Intelligent? Wise? Yes. But shrewd is up there with, you're so crafty, or you're so sneaky, you're so cunning, you're so wily. We don't really like that to be describing us. But you know what? The master in the parable, the landowner in the parable thinks, well, this is great. This is great. When he found out what his manager had done, he commended him. Instead of throwing him into jail, instead of having him tortured until he could repay what he owed, he commended the dishonest, shrewd manager for what he had done to take care of himself. And Jesus wraps up the parable saying, the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Make friends using dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may invite you to eternal homes. Betty's shaking her head, and what does this mean? What does this mean? We could spend hours trying to figure out why Jesus used this particular example to make his point. But the question really is, what is the point? What is the point that Jesus is getting at? Maybe the point is this. Jesus makes it very clear, not only in this parable, but in lots of other places in the Gospels, that money in and of itself is not a bad thing. Right? Money in and of itself is not a bad thing. He talks about money a lot. Jesus talks about it a lot in his parables. It's when you start to serve money, when money becomes not a means to an end, but the end in itself. When money becomes our God, that's when it becomes a problem. Right? That's when we get in trouble. So Jesus goes on to say at the end of the parable, so you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. But again, in this parable and many other places in Scripture, Jesus does teach us that money can be used as a means to an end. as a means to an end. The stewardship of our money, the stewardship of our stuff, our oikonomics, has long been a vital issue for Christians. Right? We've talked about this stuff. The majority of people in this world cannot live without some reference to money, without coming to some terms with money. It's not about renouncing it. It's not about renouncing our stuff. But it is about how we're being called to use our stuff, our wealth. How we are being called to be good stewards of our stuff. It's about a godly sense of oikonomics. If there's one point that all of us can agree on about this parable, it's that the manager, shrewd and dishonest as he was commended because he planned for his future. Right? The manager was commended because he planned for his future. The method might have been dishonest, but he used what was at his disposal to invest in his future. He used what was at his disposal to plan for the future. Now, I don't believe that Jesus was inviting his audience, and I don't believe he's telling us today to become dishonest in our economics. That's not the point. But he does make the point that we, the children of light, those who are disciples of Jesus, we should be at least as astute as the manager in the parable was. We should be at least as astute, thinking. If you want to use the word crafty, use it. Clever. We should be at least as astute as the manager in the parable was when it comes to dealing with one another and planning for our future. Use the money at your disposal to make friends so that when your money's gone, your friends will invite you into the eternal homes. There's a lot here that needs explaining. A lot that needs explaining. Our text calls it dishonest wealth. But really, money by itself has no character, right? So to call it dishonest wealth, I think, gives it a character that it can't have on its own. So let's call it worldly wealth. Worldly wealth. Either way, the important point is that worldly wealth or dishonest wealth is temporary. It's temporary. You can't take it with you. And the best approach to a temporary resource is to utilize it in a way that affects eternal results. The best way to use a temporary resource is to use it in a way that leads to eternal results. Jesus says to use worldly wealth to make friends for ourselves so that when the temporary is gone, we might know something of the eternal. Yes. Now, how I understand this is that we need to use our worldly capital. We need to use our wealth, our stuff, to build up heavenly capital. We need to go deeper than our stuff, which employs an economic. We need to employ an oikonomics, which invests not only in our stuff but in people. By helping those who are not always able to help themselves, we use the worldly wealth we have to build up heavenly capital. In knowing how we are to use wealth, we come to understand what Jesus says what Jesus means when he says, if you're faithful with a little, you will be faithful also with much. Yeah. So our approach to oikonomics, our approach to stewardship, needs to mirror more the approach that Johnson & Johnson took with Tylenol than Ford took with Pinto. We need to have a vision which goes beyond our present-day survival and to one that has our future, our eternal futures in mind. You know, part of our economics, part of our understanding of how to be good stewards is about buildings. It's about programs. Every year we set a church budget, right? Every year we set a church budget. We need to invest in the good care of this building, this facility, and we need to invest in the programs that our ministry offers. But to go deep with God means that we need to go deeper than our stuff. We have to go deeper than our stuff, deeper than our buildings, and deeper than our programs. To go deep with God is to understand that ministry, when you break it down, is always all about people. Ministry is about people. We are to invest in people in such a way that will lead us to being welcomed in the eternal kingdom. It used to be that in the church planting business, when you wanted to build a new church, the idea was, if you build it, they will come. You know, if you go to Southern Ontario, places like that, and some places in the States, where there's dense populations, Every little town you go to has a Presbyterian church. I mean, you drive around southern Ontario, every town you get to, on one of the main intersections of that town, there's an old Presbyterian church. And often across that Presbyterian church is a United Church or a Baptist church or an Anglican church. But almost every little place has a bunch of churches. And you go to Quebec, and every town has a Roman Catholic church. Right? And they used to do that because back in the day, if you built it, they would come. That's what people did. People went to church on Sunday mornings. You needed a building. You needed programs. You needed a lot of stuff. But these days, church planting is taking a different kind of approach. In the Presbyterian Church in Canada, we don't just build churches anymore, believing that if we build a church, people will come. We know that they don't come. We know that they won't come. Our approach to church planting, then, is rooted more in people. Not in buildings, but in people. In relationships with people. It doesn't matter where those people meet. We have churches that are meeting in homes, in coffee shops, churches that meet in other people's churches. We even have churches that meet in bars. Absolutely. What matters is the investment in the relationships between people, relationships that ultimately point towards Jesus and the relationship that Jesus wants with us. People, aren't just drawn to our stuff. People aren't drawn to our stuff. They're drawn to the story that we share. They're drawn to the stories that we share, that we embody, that we live out. People like Young Ted, Andrea, as they're working on developing their new ministries, they're not thinking about what kind of church building do I want to build. They're thinking about developing relationships between people and with Jesus, which by definition is what a church is, right? A church is Christ and his people. That's what a church is. Deeper than our stuff means that we have to practice faithful economics, to be good stewards of what has been entrusted to us, to use our stuff as a means to an end, not as an end in itself. It's easy to get off track, to believe that our stuff, that our resources, our money, our wealth is the end goal, and we know many, many people who live as if that were the case. But Jesus is very, very clear. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and wealth. One of them has to take precedence. We can try to do a cost-benefit analysis around our faith, but how do you place a value on eternal things? How do you place a value on eternal life? There was an old Indian guru, and he had a star disciple. He was so pleased with the man's progress that he left him on his own, living in a little mud hut, and his only possession was a loincloth that he wore around his middle. And the man lived simply, begging for food. Once a week, the man washed his loincloth and hung it out to dry. One day he came back and discovered that his loincloth had been torn and eaten by rats. So he went to the villagers and begged them for another loincloth. But the rats ate that one too. So the man said, I better get myself a cat. The cat took care of the rats. But now when the man begged for his food, he had to beg for a little milk for his cat. So then he thought, well, I'll get a cow to feed my cat. So in order to feed his cow, he decided to till the ground and plant wheat around the hut. But then he was so busy doing the work of farming that he had no more time for contemplation. So he decided, I better just hire some people to work on my farm. Then overseeing the laborers on his farm became a chore. So he thought, I need some help, so I'll get married and get a wife to help me with the farm. So he did, but his wife didn't like the mud hut that he lived in and demanded a real house. So the man had to grow even more crops and hire even more servants to keep his wife happy. In time, the disciple became the wealthiest man in the village. Years later, when his guru was traveling nearby, he stopped by to see his old student, and he was shocked at what he saw. Where once stood a simple mud hut, there now loomed a palace, surrounded by a vast estate, worked on by many servants. And he went to his disciple and said, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? You won't believe this, sir, the disciple replied, but there was no other way that I could keep my loincloth. It doesn't take much, eh? It doesn't take much to get sucked in, to believe that our stuff is really what matters. It's just a tool. It's a means to an end. God knows that we all need some stuff. And some of us are fortunate to have a lot of stuff. Not that we can wallow in our stuff, but so that we can invest our resources. We can invest our wealth. We can invest our stuff. Those temporary things that God has blessed us with in the eternal things that will never fade or perish. How are we using the temporary stuff of our worldly wealth? How are we using the temporary stuff of our worldly wealth? Is it preparing us for the eternal reality that God wants us to know? Is it preparing us for the eternal reality that God wants us to know? Our worldly wealth will not last. Right? Our worldly wealth will not last. We need to be practicing faithful economics so that when this stuff is gone, and it will be gone, that God will welcome us into the eternal homes that God has prepared for us. Thanks be to God. Amen.